Hi, welcome into Authentically Lovable You. I hope you guys are enjoying everything that's going on with you. And I want to thank you for all those that have been tuning in and listening to our podcast. Today, what we're going to be talking about is called emotionally codependent. Now, emotionally codependency refers to a relationship dynamic where one person excessively relies on another for emotional support and validation, often neglecting their own needs. And this can lead to an unhealthy imbalance where the codependent individual sacrifices their own well being to maintain the relationship. A lot of times in understanding emotional codependency, we don't always realize what we're doing, and we're just existing in this relationship. But you can tell by the balance in the relationship. If you're overly excessively dependent on making sure you get compliments, making sure you're validated, every little thing, every little outfit, every little comment, that's a bit excessive. But let's go into the dynamics of understanding truly what emotional codependency is and how to look for the signs. And of course, what you can do to work yourself out of it. So, to understand emotional codependency is a relationship dynamic where one person excessively prioritizes the needs and feelings of another, often at the expense of their own well being. And this behavior can lead to unhealthy patterns and a lack of personal identity. So, personal identity is how you see yourself. All right? It's not always your job, it's not always your marriage. It's how you identify as a person. So the signs of emotional codependency: 1, you self-sacrifice. You're constantly putting the other person's needs before your own. Number 2, fear of abandonment. Feeling anxious about the possibility of losing the relationship. 3, having low self-esteem. Your self-worth is heavily tied to the approval of the other person, neglecting personal needs, ignoring your own interests and responsibilities to cater to the other person, and having control issues to manage or fix other person's problems, often leading to conflict. So you want to maybe look at each of those components, maybe do a pulse for yourself on where you're the strongest, all right, or how many of them you hit, how many you can relate to. And so there are themes to work on. Emotionally codependency, like most of the different phases that we have talked about in authenticity, block the road to authenticity. So when we're codependent on someone, we're not being authentic to ourselves, we're not fulfilling our needs, we're not looking within to look at our identity. Who am I? I know for many years when I was a teacher and I quit teaching, or a different kind of situation, it was hard to identify who was I, because I was so tied to that job. I was so tied to that career. But I know that if you give yourself time and you look within yourself and you identify your true character traits, your integrity, your ethics, your morals, your values, you're walking in your authenticity, and then you begin to create a new identity, maybe something that you had not thought of before. So take a look at those. So let's talk about the causes of emotional codependency. Emotional codependency often stems from past experiences, such as growing up in dysfunctional families, like we've talked about, or being in relationships with individuals who have addiction or mental health issues. These backgrounds can create a pattern where one learns to prioritize others' needs over their own. So you get very focused on other people's needs. It's like enabling, instead of encouraging that person to accept responsibility for their actions. Now, for every action, we have a positive or negative consequence. So if you're enabling, you're preserving that person to learn the lessons. You're prolonging it. And the only person that's going to learn their lesson is you. So enabling is a very dangerous codependent trait. And you want to take a step back. Maybe you're crossing some boundaries that you shouldn't cross. So just take a look at that and see if that's you. How do we move towards healthier relationships? Well, to overcome emotional codependency, it is essential to, like I just said, number one, set boundaries. Learn to say no and prioritize your own needs. Two, develop self-esteem. Engage in activities that boost your self-worth outside of the relationship. We've talked about these before. Hobbies, running, maybe getting into a painting club, maybe a bowling team, maybe archery, maybe writing, maybe drawing. Okay. And it begins to develop your self-esteem, because every time you learn something new, of course, the first time you do it, it's not going to be perfection. But so you want to grow and you want to learn, right? And as you do that, you build your self-esteem. And finally, seek support. Consider therapy or support groups to address underlying issues and learn healthier relationship dynamics. A lot of times when we're in the midst of the situation, we cannot see it clearly. And so we want to maybe bring in an outside observer that can see it for what it is and be open to their suggestions. It doesn't mean you have to accept it, but consider it, all right? And so finally, recognizing and addressing emotional codependency can lead to more balanced and fulfilling relationships. So these are some of the things that we want to look out for, right? So how does authenticity play into emotional codependency? Well, like we talked about, when you're being emotionally codependent, you're completely dependent on that person to fulfill you. Well, so what if you wake up one day and something happens to that person? Or maybe they leave, or maybe they decide that it's toxic to constantly have to approve you, to constantly give you compliments. And if they don't do it by a certain time or a certain way or so many times a day, then you're going to be upset. And that's not healthy, because obviously that self-esteem, that self-worth is within us. We have to learn to manage it. We have to learn to say, what are the things that are important to us? What is the area, or what are the blockages maybe that are causing how I feel about myself to affect my outside relationships? You may not even be aware of it. Other people may say to you, you're really insecure. And, that's not never a positive compliment. And so you have to look at, what do they mean you're insecure? Well, what is the opposite of being insecure? Secure. Now, we can't always control the outcome, nor should we. We can't always control, recognize, or predict another person's behavior. People have free will, they have free choice. And so we have to be confident. That's what it means to be secure. We have to be confident in our decisions. We have to be confident and know that when we are in certain situations, that we can handle what comes our way. Now, even if that person maybe does something out of line with your character, your morals, your values, remember, we have boundaries in place. And so if those boundaries are crossed, we have to have a conversation with that person. Would be the mature adult thing to do. And secondly, have a discussion with yourself of, what am I going to do about this? This is what boundaries are for. And so if you've been in a relationship a while, hopefully you are clear on your boundaries, and hopefully that person is on the same page with you. But then again, we grow and we change and relationships change. And so we can't always predict what other people are going to do, right? Sometimes we can't always predict what we're going to do. We don't always know what's going to happen until we're in that situation. And when we're in that situation, and it may be overwhelming, you have to take a step back before you react, right? And then you come to a place where you can respond at the appropriate time. In some instances, a response is not necessary. If there's someone that is completely, excessively, time and time again, overriding your boundaries, then you can step back and step away. There are no written laws in this. You get to determine your relationships and the path that they're going to go. And step one is always your boundaries. I've said before, I didn't grow up with boundaries. I didn't know boundaries until I was much older. And it's a very important part of all your relationships. You don't always have to, go up and, give them a list of your boundaries. But definitely when you're in important relationships, dating, marriage, even work relationships or siblings or family, you need to make sure that your boundaries are clear and concise. You have to understand where you're operating from. And that's where authenticity comes in, because when you are walking in integrity, when you know the morals and the values that you contain and your ethics, then those boundaries become very easily. It is common sense to know that when these boundaries are in place, it's going to be really easy for you to recognize people that are not operating in those values and morals. And those are not safe people, as we've talked about before. The book Safe People by Cloud and Townsend. You want to make sure you're in the appropriate and loving and supportive relationship beyond positive. Those are all healthy relationships you want to be in. If you are not in those, then you need to take a step back and maybe change some things. But remember, change always begins within ourselves. And so authenticity will support an emotionally healthy relationship. There needs to be balance, not one person doing everything and the other person not. It needs to be, as we say, 100%, 100%. Everybody give 100%. There's no such thing as 50-50. So we want to make sure those relationships are in balance and that we are emotionally healthy. We're not relying completely on that other person to sustain us, because again, that is enabling. So to be completely authentic with yourself, do a check on your relationships and ask yourself, are these emotionally healthy relationships, or am I being too dependent on a particular person for particular needs all the time? And if so, create a boundary, right? Ask yourself those questions. Sometimes they're hard questions, but they're necessary. So I hope this has helped you. All right. Remember, we all want to be in emotionally healthy, loving, positive, supportive relationship. And your authenticity is the groundwork that produces that. So I hope you have a great day and a great weekend. And until next time, continue to be authentically lovable you. Take care.